Hello, it's 10 a.m. on Thursday, the 2nd of April. You're tuned into our mid-morning newscast here on Arirang TV. Thanks ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. Let's take a look at the headlines. With buzz growing that U.S. Defense Chief Ashton Carter could bring up the possible deployment of a controversial U.S. missile defense system to South Korea during a trip to Seoul next week, we take a look at what the expectations are. A new bullet train service linking Seoul with the city of Gwangju and the rest of the southwest starts ferrying passengers up and down the country. Plus, the U.S. says negotiations over Iran's nuclear program will continue until at least Thursday, 2 days after the original deadline. Starting us off this morning is the speculation surrounding the possible deployment of a U.S. system known as Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, to the Korean Peninsula. With the defense chiefs of both countries meeting in Seoul next week, we're going to take a look at the expectations the U.S. delegation will bring up THAAD, a highly controversial matter both inside and outside of South Korea. Connie Kim starts us off.
Will they or won't they? With around a week remaining until U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter arrives in Seoul for talks with his South Korean counterpart Han Min-gu, the elephant in the room is whether they touch upon the possible deployment to the Korean peninsula of the U.S. missile defense system called THAAD.
The U.S. government has not formally proposed THAAD talks. If Carter does during his trip, it will become a political issue. Then Seoul and Washington will be pressed to make a decision.
Some observers believe a bigger issue needs to be addressed before the U.S. proposes talks about THAAD. Experts say that Seoul and Washington would have to agree on the severity of the North Korean nuclear threat in order for THAAD talks to proceed.
Budget sequestration in the U.S. meant defense spending was cut. The U.S. believes North Korea has scaled up its nuclear threat, so the Pentagon says it needs more funds. The South Korean government, on the hand, is not keen on increasing its defense budget.
Other experts think THAAD is unlikely to come up during Carter's visit.
China's reaction on the THAAD issue, very controversial. I don't think he's going to raise any controversial issues at all. Rather, he will say the U.S. commitment to the defense of South Korea.
China and Russia say THAAD threatens their national security because the system's radar has a range of up to 2,000 kilometers, meaning it would cover significant parts of their mainland territories. Sandwiched between Beijing and Washington, observers say Seoul must make its own objective decision and not be swayed by the superpowers. However, until official talks on THAAD materialize, the two countries will focus on trying to find common ground on security, military, and diplomatic issues at upcoming defense talks in Washington and Singapore. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, as a follow-up to that report, the U.S. defense contractor that developed THAAD has reportedly been providing information about the system to the Korean government. A representative of Lockheed Martin told the New York Times that it has been supplying information to Korea and the U.S. as there's a possibility Seoul might purchase the system. This comes amid the controversy over whether Seoul will let the U.S. set up THAAD in Korea as part of its pivot to Asia strategy. U.S. President Barack Obama has issued an executive order to authorize his government to sanction foreign hackers who plan or carry out cyber attacks on the U.S. In a statement on Wednesday, he granted the Secretary of Treasury, the Attorney General, and the Secretary of State permission to impose sanctions involving diplomatic engagement, trade policy tools, and law enforcement mechanisms. Obama said that cyber threats pose one of the most serious economic and national security challenges to the U.S., and the new program will help counter such malicious threats. In January, the U.S. imposed new sanctions on North Korea after a cyber attack on Sony Pictures. Now, there were hopes for dialogue between the two Koreas in April as the joint military drills between South Korea and the U.S. come to a close towards the end of the month. But now, many are doubting that possibility, with several factors stirring up tensions again. For more on the prospects of talks this month, our Hwang Sang-hee reports.
Hopes for fresh momentum in inter-Korean ties are fading. The joint military training drills end on April 24th, but the two Koreas have another issue to resolve before then. With April 10th, the payday for North Korean workers at the Kaesong Industrial Complex fast approaching, the two countries will have to settle the ongoing wage tussle. North Korea is demanding a unilateral raise for its workers and a revision in regulations. South Korea says these issues must be settled through government-level talks. Seoul's Unification Ministry said Wednesday the issue is still in a deadlock.
There is no progress in discussions between the Kaesong Industrial District Management Committee and the North Korean government regarding the issue of a wage hike.
Pyongyang also warned of merciless action against Seoul if the country opens a UN office on North Korea's human rights situation. The field office was one of the recommendations made in a United Nations report published last year. Despite the threats, the office is expected to open in Seoul later this spring. Considering all these factors, experts say tension will remain high on the Korean peninsula.
North Korea will call for a change in South Korea, and it's not likely for Pyongyang to offer any compensation to pave the way to dialogue.
3 South Korean detainees in North Korea are adding to tensions. Pyongyang recently said it is holding 2 South Koreans who it claims were spying on the regime, in addition to another man detained since late 2013. Experts say South Korea should be more active in seeking dialogue with North Korea for the release of the 3 detainees. They suggest dispatching an envoy to Pyongyang as a possible viable option. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
The South Korean government has vowed to take action in response to reports that Japan will renew claims to Korea's easternmost islets of Dokdo. Japan's Kyodo News Service reports that Tokyo's foreign ministry plans to assert sovereignty over Dokdo in their 2015 white paper, which is scheduled to be released in early April. On Wednesday, the Korean Foreign Ministry reiterated its stance that, by history, geography and international law, Dokdo is 100% Korean territory. The ministry warned that it would firmly deal with any further territorial provocations from Japan. The man who attacked U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Mark Lippert last month in Seoul has been charged with attempted murder. Kim Ki-jong was also indicted Wednesday on charges of assault on a foreign envoy and obstruction of business. Prosecutors say his crime was intentional and carefully planned. Kim earlier told investigators that he targeted Lippert to express opposition to the ongoing South Korea-U.S. military drills. Now, whether Kim also violated the national security law banning acts that promote North Korean ideology is still being investigated. A trial for Kim could open as early as next week.
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. ARIRANG News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers 15 billion. Now, there's been another significant advance in Korea's highly acclaimed rail network. 6 years since breaking ground, bullet trains that slash travel time from Seoul to Korea's southwestern city of Gwangju officially began transporting passengers this Thursday morning. President Park Geunhye celebrated the opening of the latest KTX line on Wednesday, saying it'll spur regional development. Our Chae-sun reports.
President Park Geunhye hopped on a high-speed train running on a new line stretching through Korea's southwest. The 182 kilometers of tracks starting from Osong will shorten travel time from Seoul to the southwestern city of Gwangju to about 90 minutes. President Park said this latest railway will help the local economy grow and spur social and cultural cooperation in the region.
호남 고속철도 건설에 따른 25조 원의 경제적 파급 효과와 함께 전북, 광주 등 지역별 창조경제 혁신 센터를 중심으로 활발한 인적 교류와 기업 이전을 촉진하게 될 것입니다.
Since operations began in 2004, Korea's bullet train, the KTX, has only been able to travel at half its speed in the southwestern region because tracks were unfit for a high-speed locomotive. Now only 3 hours away from the Incheon International Airport, President Park said Gwangju could develop into a global city along the west coast. In line with this, plans to increase KTX services from Incheon Airport to Gwangju during its hosting of the 2015 Summer Universiade in July were also announced. There are also expectations that the high-speed railroad will promote advanced rail technology around the world. In fact, joining President Park on Wednesday's test ride was a visiting Malaysian transport official. Both Malaysia and Singapore have shown interest in Korea's rail technology and plan to place an order later this year for a $22 billion high-speed railway project to link their countries. The second phase of Korea's high-speed rail project, connecting Gwangju to the southern city of Mokpo, meanwhile, remains in limbo as the finance and transport ministries differ on the route. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
Now, Korea continued its current account surplus streak into a 36th straight month in February. The Bank of Korea says the surplus reached around $6.5 billion. That's up over 40% from the surplus in the same month last year. Both exports and imports dropped, though, from the previous year, but inbound shipments shrank at a faster rate due to falling global oil prices. Exports of goods were down more than 15%, while imports plunged around 20%. The central bank expects this year's current account surplus to reach a record high $94 billion. Korea's consumer prices grew at the slowest pace in nearly 16 years last month. The latest data raises one of the biggest warning flags yet about the increasing deflationary pressures in the economy amid sluggish output and weak demand at home. Park Geunhye has the details.
Despite an oil price rebound recently, global crude prices have been on a sharp overall downward trend in the past year, providing relief for drivers here in Korea.
I used to drive around 300 kilometers by filling in about $50 worth of oil, but these days I drive around 400 kilometers.
And as oil prices fall, so does the country's inflation. Statistics Korea data shows that last month consumer prices rose at the slowest pace since July 1999, growing a mere 0.4% from a year ago. If we exclude tobacco prices, which doubled recently, the inflation rate would have actually been below zero. Now, this, coupled with a fragile recovery momentum, is raising concerns of deflation. Korea's traditional growth engine exports dropped for the third straight month in March, while production in the mining and manufacturing sectors dropped nearly 5% in February from the previous year.
The pace of recovery is not strong enough compared to growth efforts, like the central bank trimming the key rate to a record low, the government introducing stimulus measures, and the positive effect coming from low oil prices.
The finance ministry tried to dismiss concerns of increasing deflationary pressures, saying the core inflation, which excludes volatile oil and agricultural products, was up 2.1% from a year ago. That, however, also marks the slowest growth since December last year. Based on those figures, experts say it's likely the central bank will lower its growth forecast of 3.4% for this year when it releases its new outlook next week. Park Geunhye, Arirang News.
The sign-up period for joining the China-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank has come to a close, with over 40 countries on board to become founding members. Two glaring absentees from the list are the US and Japan. For more on where the AIIB goes from here, Shin Se-min reports.
A total of 46 countries lined up to become the founding members of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, an institution that aims to help low-income regions with the necessary funds for large development projects. The four largest European economies, Germany, UK, France, and Italy, as well as Australia, Brazil, and South Korea, have applied to become members. But the U.S. and Japan opted out for the March 31st deadline, with Washington citing concerns over the AIIB's governing standards and whether it'll negatively affect U.S.-based institutions like the World Bank. Japanese officials also said that the country will wait and watch how China guarantees fair governance at the bank. So far, the AIIB has confirmed $100 billion in capital, with the initial subscribed capital at around $50 billion. Proposed by China in 2013, the bank is seen as China's attempt to take on a more prominent role in the global financial system. Experts question whether the bank will successfully grant loans, and they'll be watching to see which countries and what types of companies benefit from the institution. The final list of founding members will be confirmed on April 15th, and the completion of signing and negotiations will take place in June. The bank is expected to be set up by the end of this year. 신세민, 아리랑 뉴스.
Time for the international news now, and no breakthrough yet in the talks on Iran's nuclear program. Differences over key details are keeping negotiators in Switzerland, to continue their dialogue 2 days past their self-imposed deadline. For more on this and the other global stories we are following this hour, we connect to Eunice Kim as we normally do at the News Centre. So Eunice, a lot is at stake with these talks. Is there any sign at all that an agreement can be reached as these talks bleed into Thursday?
Hi, Mark. Well, that is the million-dollar question at the moment, isn't it? At the end of this round of talks, Iranian negotiators want a general political statement, while its negotiating partners want to include detailed steps that will be taken into the June 30th deadline when a final agreement will be reached. At least that is the plan. Patience, though, is running thin.
That they need to exhibit political will and flexibility in order to move forward. Iran has exhibited that political will. Iran has shown its readiness to engage with dignity.
But if we are in a situation where we sense that the talks have stalled, then yes, the United States and the international community is prepared to walk away, because we've been very clear about what kinds of commitments we expect, and we've been clear about those kinds of commitments for in excess of a year.
Prepared to walk away, but Washington is keeping on going as long as progress is being made toward the finish line. And to that end, the State Department said its top diplomat John Kerry would stay in Lausanne at least through Thursday morning. Another sign of hope is that the French foreign minister was returning to the Swiss city, hinting at chances for a deal. He and his Russian and Chinese counterparts had left less than a day earlier. Disagreement also still remains over Tehran's future atomic research and also the conditions of lifting UN sanctions, with Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei reportedly demanding immediate and complete sanctions lifting. Mark.
And Eunice, let's continue now to the Germanwings crash. The CEO of Lufthansa, the parent company of Germanwings, has made a visit to the crash site in the French Alps. He went there on Wednesday. What did he have to say?
Well, his name is Carsten Spohr, and he said it will take a long time to determine for certain the string of events that had ultimately led to last week's devastating crash, which, of course, had killed all 150 people on board. He and Germanwings managing director Thomas Winkelmann laid a wreath at a memorial site to pay respects to the victims. It is located near the crash site in the village of Le Vernet. Now, Spohr said that there was not a single hour he and his colleagues don't think about what he called the terrible accident and were just very, very sorry beyond words. He, though, did not answer questions as to what he had known about the mental health condition of co-pilot Andreas Lubitz, who, of course, is suspected of deliberately crashing that plane. Mark.
Yeah, there is a legal investigation underway, so not much really he can say about that co-pilot who may or may not have deliberately crashed that plane into the French Alps. Well, thank you very much, as always, Eunice, for your reports.
You bet.
And a good Thursday morning to you all as we kick things off with the 2015 Summer Universiade, which will kick off later this year in Gwangju. And with the event about 5 months away now, President Park Geunhye herself is making sure everything's on the right track. Now, according to an official, President Park Geunhye inspected the preparations for the 2015 Summer Universiade in order to make sure that the city can successfully host the event. And with about 20,000 athletes, officials, and press from 170 countries coming together from July 3rd to the 14th, event organizers will make sure everything is done on time as the city becomes the third Korean city to host a Universiade event. Now we're well into the new 2015 LPGA season, and starting on Thursday U.S. time, the first LPGA major of the season will tee off with the 2015 ANA Inspiration. Now a brand new tournament name, but the familiar faces of the LPGA will vie for the top prize as Lexi Thompson looked to repeat last year's performance when she became the second youngest major winner. But with Lydia Ko on fire this season, she may just be the favorite to jump into Poppy's Pond, a tradition amongst the winners of the major event. Meanwhile, Park Geunhye, who trails Ko in the world golf rankings, looked to pull off another major victory en route to taking back her #1 ranking from the teenager. Kim Hyo-ju, Kim Se-young, and Jang Ha-na. Now, these are some of the names that are currently in the LPGA but started their career in the KLPGA. And thanks to their success, the KLPGA is seeing a huge rise in popularity. And with that, for the first time in history, the KLPGA Media Day took place on Wednesday, with a brand new season teeing off a week from now. And to showcase a new look for the KLPGA, they revealed a brand new emblem, using the colors red for passion, blue for sportsmanship, and yellow for vision. Now the big question remains, who will be the next Kim Hyo-ju in 2015? Now, the last time the Samsung Hwaja Blue Fangs in the men's V-League failed to win the championship title was back during the 2006-2007 season. And since then, they were pretty much unstoppable until OK Savings Bank took the first 2 games of the championship series and went after the sweep on Wednesday night. And just like the first 2 games, OK Savings Bank dominates offensively and defensively as they take the first 2 sets 25-19 and 25-19 once again before the Blue Fangs take the 3rd set. By the 4th set, despite a late rally from the Blue Fangs, it's Robert Landy Simone and the OK Savings Bank who take the 4th set for a 3-1 victory and their first V-League championship title. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. It's hard to believe we have a rainy afternoon ahead. It's bright outside right now and the air quality is good, so enjoy it if you can before it gets cloudy and wet again. It will start to rain again this afternoon here in Seoul, and we're expecting heavier precipitation this time than the ones we've just had. So the most regions will see somewhere between 5 to 40 millimeters, and this rain could be accompanied by thunder and lightning. So carry out an umbrella on your way out. But despite the rain, the daytime highs will be slightly higher than yesterday. But you know, rain and winds can bring down the sensory temperatures, so dress warmly. And the daytime high here in the capital will later peak at 19, while Daegu and Gwangju rise to 21, and Busan will top out at 17 this afternoon. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island and Daejeon should see a high of 24 and 22, while Dokdo makes it to 11. It seems like this rain will let up tomorrow early morning, and readings will get a bit cooler, but it looks to be quite promising. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, those are the stories and the weather we have for you at this hour. We'll be back throughout the day with many more news updates, and I'll be back at noon Korea time with Gwangju for Newsline at noon. We do hope you can join us then. Goodbye.